Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar on the UN 2.0 week, focusing on a very interesting topic that we will be discussing today with the distinguished intervenants and people we have, experts we have invited. It's about enabling the transformation as part of the UN 2.0 vision of the Secretary General and how we can take that forward. So my name is SDG Lab. I will be your moderator today. I am the director at the SDG Lab, which is the social innovation space and design lab for policy at the UN in Geneva. And I will be walking you through and facilitating the session today. Before we go into the discussion itself, let me actually introduce you to people that are going to be with us today and share what it means to be a champion on enablers and promoting this type of work within the system. So I would like to start with the list of people, beginning with Miguel Gordo, who's the Director of Global Strategy and Policy Division at the UNOH, the Human Resource Division. Sorry for that, Miguel. Then we have Susa Nagi-Sandor with us from UNHCR. Hi, Susa. Welcome to the webinar as well. We have Mary McLennan. She's from the Executive Office of the Secretary General, working on and being actually the lead of the UN Behavioral Science Group as part of the UN Innovation Network as well. Then we have Martin also with us, Martin Kalunga-Bandel. He's actually an external speaker, so pleased and happy that you can be here, Martin, and also present us with maybe a critical view on what the UN does or does not do, for that matter. He's from the Presenting Institute at the University of Oxford, from the Said Business School at the University of Oxford. And finally, I believe, this is basically, just let me give me 1 second. This is the panel. What I would like to maybe recall before we dive into discussion is, please check out also the different, elements that actually constitute this agenda of the UN 2.0 and what it means. I'm not going to repeat it, you all know that, but there are 5 key elements, including foresight, innovation, behavioral science, data, and other things. These are key elements of what we are trying to deliver as part of the system. So if any further ado, let me actually start right away the discussion. And also please free actually to share. This is a very interactive discussion. Please feel free to share your ideas, your insights, your inputs within the chat. We will do our best to keep up with your questions and take them on as we go through the session. So the first enabler is about human resources. And I would like to actually start with Miguel. Miguel, hi Miguel, hi to this, welcome to the panel. And I believe you're based in New York, so good morning to you. Human resources, Miguel, and you are the expert here, right, is maybe the most critical enabler, if one can say, for the UN 2.0 transformation, since it can and has to support the cultural change needed for an organization to embrace data, right? The different elements that we mentioned of the agenda, so data, digital, behavioral science, foresight, and innovation capabilities. Now, this transformation needs to be done in an inclusive way. We're using inclusive approaches to make sure full representation of the people that the UN serves is ensured. Now, Miguel, in your opinion, how does the UN strategic human resources work towards making that very vision of the UN 2.0 possible and feasible? Over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. We have a lot to celebrate this week, and there's been already so many sessions. So thanks for that, and I'm also very grateful to be among such illustrious panel. It's an excellent question to start, and what I would say is it's indeed a journey, cultural transformation, and human resources does have a critical role to play. What I would say is that perhaps one of the critical aspects or roles is to connect the dots. So we're seeing also a way to enable the UN 2.0 cultural transformation. We're seeing it's going to be critical to connect also all the elements and streams of talent management. In doing so, of course, the focus is on building a workforce that does reflect all the UN 2.0 capabilities, what we attach strategic importance to, not only to achieve and deliver of the mandates of the United Nations now, but also looking into what's going to be needed to maintain that competitive advantage into the future, ensuring that the organization is agile and can adjust to an ever-changing operating environment in technology and others, and of course, changes of mandates. I would say one of the critical aspects of HR is going to be to continuously advance cultural transformation. And as I said, it's going to be a process. And to do so, we have recently launched what we call a values and behaviors framework that for us, it does set the basis of transformation of the organizational culture. And again, it's focusing on who we are today, but also brings a number of the aspirational elements for the organization to continue to do its work effectively and efficiently. And I'm sure colleagues will have seen it in terms of focusing, the values, inclusion, integrity, humility, humanity, and there's a circle of behaviors, of some of which very clearly and directly correlate with the transformational agenda in terms of adapting, innovating, connecting, collaborating. So those are some critical elements. I would also say that in the context of talent management, you'll see also a very rich involvement of human resources. For example, in order to define the skills that we're going to need and the jobs that we should have to drive digital transformation, we have started to undertake a comprehensive job analysis, focusing on the functions that we believe are going to be critical to support the vision for a UN 2.0. We've also going to be focused on learning. It's going to be a critical element of talent management and learning solutions that are going to be organized around UN 2.0 capabilities, leveraging, of course, options for online learning, but also customized learning paths, in particular for data-related skills. Another critical element where HR plays a critical role is to creating leadership programs to build and sustain leadership and managerial capabilities and capacity of the organization, particularly at the senior level, but also at the middle and junior levels. That will be equally important. And I would also say that in the context of creating a results-oriented culture, leadership will be critical, and so continuous learning, supporting high performance, supporting creativity, as well as managerial excellence are going to be really important enablers to achieve transformation. Perhaps just one last word on outreach and looking at the talent that we bring into the organization, being very clear in terms of transmitting that to the outside world. And that will involve focusing on the needs for skills and capabilities that are going to be required to deliver on the UN 2.0 vision, particularly through the quintet of change. So within all of that, and you've said it, our commitment continues to be also to ensure we have as diverse workforce as possible that truly reflects the diversity of the peoples that we serve. So looking at a truly universal set of lenses and methods to recruit is going to be critical to ensure that we bring those different perspectives and embed it into the skills that are needed so that we have a very diverse talent pool supporting transformation. So let me stop there. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Miguel. Wow, it was incredibly rich what you shared, and I've taken so many notes. You can't see it on your screen, of course, but it's almost a page long. But just maybe let me quickly pick up one or two things before we dive into the second enabler. It must be challenging to think what's going to be ahead, anticipating while building already, the workforce of today and tomorrow. I think this sort of, balancing of long-term versus short-term is indeed also in our own work at the lab quite difficult and challenging. So interesting to hear that from yours, and also what you said about creativity as a key, skill to have as we go into also, a time where things are a bit more, let's say, ambiguous and maybe less foreseeable. And how do we deal with that through creativity? Having said that, diving into the second enabler, thank you, Miguel, again. Looking actually now towards UNHCR, our colleague from an agency perspective, Susan Nagy-Sandor, I hope I managed to pronounce your name correctly, Susan. If not, you tell me, as someone that has been challenged many times on its name. You are doing something quite actually creative with the fellowship that you have been working on and making happen within UNHCR. So as mentioned before, there's more to change in the skills mix of an organization than just hiring, right? We also need to equip the colleagues with the new capabilities, the mindset, expose them to new approaches, do new ideas and ways of thinking as we go. So training is, of course, one of the key things in order to achieve that, and we'll hear more about it in the following session. But another way of doing that is to invest in a longer running, so to speak, capacity strengthening program. And that's, I believe, what your fellowship is about. A program that allows people to practice new approaches and also learn on the job as we go. I mean, Miguel mentioned it, lifelong learning. And so on that, can you just talk a bit about what UNHCR does under your leadership in terms of a program on fellowship, what your experiences are in running such a program, and also how it helps equip colleagues with new skills and drive culture change. And I believe you have a few slides to share. So over to you, Susan.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. It's a real honor. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So yes, I work in UNHCR's Innovation Service, and my name is Zhuzha. You were very close. The Innovation Service's main mission is to create an enabling environment for innovation to flourish in UNHCR. So we actually have quite a few programs to achieve this. We want to equip our staff with knowledge, resources, and skills that they need to solve problems and deliver UNHCR's mandate in new and effective ways. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. You'll see here that the Innovation Service actually has 5 big programs. We have 4 funds: the Refugee-Led Innovation, the Digital Innovation, the Environment and Climate Action Innovation, and the Data Innovation Fund. And the fellowship that you're asking about sits under Innovation Learning. So the Innovation Learning is what I'm leading on, but it's very important to mention that our funds are also huge enablers of innovation and of solving tough challenges in the work that UNHCR does. We've had 2 rounds of the funds. We had over 5,000 applications, half of them from refugees, and we did 120 plus projects to support with a value of over $15.2 million. So it's a very long, it's a really good process with these 5 pillars, with the 4 funds and the Innovation Learning to support. The Innovation Learning's flagship program is the Innovation Fund that you've asked about. And so we've been running the Fellowship since 2013. We've had 10 iterations of the program. We've upskilled over 200 colleagues. And if you could go to the next slide, please. The goal of the Innovation Fellowship really is to enable and empower our colleagues to take tough and complex challenges head on, and to be able to have the skills to be able to face them. As we just heard in the previous one from Miguel, we don't always know what the challenges of the future will be, but our hope is that through the fellowship, our colleagues are actually enabled to take them on, whatever they may be. So our approach is that we create a safe space for exploration and experimentation. It's a 6-month program. We have workshops, webinars, and coaching, peer coaching, consultation. We connect our fellows with alumni fellows, and we also organize a variety of events for the alumni network as well. So the training or the support for innovation goes beyond the fellowship, which is also important to highlight. As the fellows go through the learning, they also have to do tasks. So they have to go through a path of innovation where they actually put theory into action. And so going through the innovation project, which they choose themselves, they choose a challenge that they're working on or that they want to solve, and that takes them through the innovation process. What's also important to highlight, as Miguel said, is diversity. We actually accept fellows to the program from across UNHCR, from the wider UN ecosystem, from nonprofits, and from partner organizations. And this is regardless of role, grade, functional area, location. And this also results in a huge plethora of projects that fellows work on. So both the challenges that they choose and the solutions that they choose to implement are incredibly diverse, very colorful, and it goes all the way from solving HR challenges to fixing really big problems in refugee camps. And I have to say it's beautiful to be part of this fellowship and to see all the people go through this process. It's a really inspiring place to be, I think. And the fellows who participate are absolute brilliant colleagues who we select not based on creativity or based on skills or experience. We choose them because they're motivated and because they're ready to solve challenges. We also walk the walk with the fellowship. We never do the fellowship same way twice. We iterate, we introduce new challenges, new solutions. We focus on the organizational priorities. We look at what worked for the learners, what didn't. And we look at the evolving reality around us. So actually this year, we also put in futures and foresight, looking at the quintet of change. We're going to look more into behavioral sciences. And so we're also broadening the scope and making sure that the fellowship is up to date and the skills and the practice that fellows gain from the fellowship are really the most relevant that they can be in solving the complex challenges that they face. So in our, just to wrap up here, in our introduction call, Martin gave a very nice framework. He will talk to you later about how he approaches learning. And I hope you know my Martin, I borrowed it from you because I think it's a really great way to showcase what we want for our fellows and what we hope from our fellowship. We want our fellows to know that innovation is a way to solve tough and complex challenges that might seem too overwhelming to grasp. We want our fellows to feel supported and empowered to try new things. And we hope that the fellows are skilled leaders of innovation by the end of the process, and we do look at them as our ambassadors of change. I'll stop there, and I'll be very happy to answer questions later on. Thank you so much for the question, Azia.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, exactly. Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing. And maybe if you can also share the slides with the participants of at least of the group, the innovation group, so that they then can, the innovation network, sorry, and they can then share the participants, that would be great. But just to say, I think it's fantastic how you're really, it seems to me at least, first time I'm at least hearing about this program. I'm definitely interested in maybe applying myself, or at least my team. I will motivate them to do so, but it's really democratic or more participatory approach to innovation, because I think I can speak on behalf of many of us that oftentimes innovation remains quite siloed and quite boxed in organizations. So you're opening the space up. I think that's fantastic. And which brings me actually then to the second point, which is about what you're also doing. I think through the program that you just presented, you're building a community of practice, because you mentioned the ambassadors. And that's exactly what Mary McLennan is going to speak about from the Behavioral Science Group in the OSG's office. Hi, Mary. Welcome to the panel. We would like to hear from you on your work on the communities of practice. So, as you know, colleagues across the UN have very diverse experiences exploring and working in the areas of UN 2.0 and the quintet of change. There are now communities of practice across the different UN areas. You yourself are leading one on behavioral science. Now, my first question to you, so you will have two short ones, just giving you a heads up. First of all, why do these communities of practice matter to advancing UN 2.0? Why do you think it's important to have such practices?
Great, thanks for that question. It's an honor to be with all you all today to talk about the communities of practice across UN 2.0. So I'll answer this question in two parts. First, I'll speak to my experience within the behavioral science group, some contextual specific things that we've found, and then I'll speak a little bit more broadly to some of the things that colleagues have found across UN 2.0. So the behavioral science group has been around for over 5 years now. It's one of the more longer standing communities within the UN 2.0 group. And from when I first came into the UN, it was very apparent that the UN is a large organization with lots happening around the world, and we're not always linked into each other and know what we're doing the different approaches and challenges that we're facing. So in those early days, my colleague Johanna Joachim and I put together the UN Behavioral Science Group. So we started to connect colleagues on a one-to-one basis through 2 larger initiatives that we ran, including UN Behavioral Science Week. So what's important to note about this is it's not so simple and just say, okay, let's get everybody together and just connect. There's lots of thinking to be done on how do we do this effectively and meaningfully. So even though we have a group of colleagues interested in behavioral science across the UN, there's a lot of diversity in that group. So we have some colleagues who are behavioral scientists, we have some who are new, and behavioral science is one of the newer areas of the quintet. So we have lots of colleagues who are relatively new. Colleagues working in health and climate and gender. We also have colleagues focusing in Latin America and the Caribbean and the African region. So really kind of thinking, how can we make a community that really is tailored to the needs, interests, and demands of those within the UN? And as a technical behavioral scientist myself, it's a lot of thinking about how do we use our resources and time in the most effective and efficient way. So that's sort of some broader pieces with respect to behavioral science. But then now going back to kind of the bigger purpose and really the importance, maybe going beyond why do they matter? Maybe why are these communities important? So there are two elements here that I from my vantage point, at least, think we're all tackling. So the first is that we give colleagues an opportunity to really, who are interested in behavioral science, a space to learn more and to engage, to comfortably, more slowly if they'd like to, or quickly as well, what are these new areas of thinking and work, and how could they be applied to what I'm doing? So giving that space there to do that, and a welcoming environment is something that we do. And some of these things can be quite technical. So having that really meeting colleagues where they are introduction is very important. And the second element here is providing a space for people actually working on topics actively to come together and to exchange ideas, test, maybe even collaborate on projects. And we've seen that as well in the behavioral science group, in addition to the others across the UN. I'll stop there. Thanks.
No, fantastic. Thank you. Actually, the second question, very briefly, if I may, builds on what you just said. And just wondering, what are some of the concrete ways actually, in which UN 2.0 communities are indeed enabling transformation? Again, you spoke to this already, but if you can be a bit more sort of precise in terms of maybe giving concrete examples, and what do you think some of the lessons learned might be there for those working to apply UN 2.0 in their work?
Yes, thanks for that question as well. I think this is a very nuanced one, so it's hard to summarize in only a few minutes here. But I'll just speak very briefly to the different communities and try to generate interest as possible. So as I mentioned, everyone's different. The communities are different, the interests, the needs, the way we apply these different approaches across UN 2.0 are different. So the UN Behavioral Science Group has gone down the track of we have Behavioral Science Week, which has taken place the last 5 years. It's a space for colleagues new or experienced in behavioral science to share their thinking and work. And I think that's been a really fundamental and important way of bringing colleagues into the conversation. We also have a guidance from Secretary General, a report on behavioral science. We work with entities with technical knowledge, as I said, and we also have our own fellowship where we bring fellows into the UN. So that's kind of our spectrum of things that we're working on. There's in the chat there the links to join the behavioral science group as well as the others for those who maybe didn't catch them the first time. So there's behavioral science within the data community. There is a data strategy. So if you want to know more about exactly what's the vision for data within the UN in particular, there's that you can definitely check out. They're working on job descriptions. There's also the CRAFT Complex Risk Analytics Fund, which is dedicated to funding projects with a strong data focus in the UN. So that's the approach data is taken. I'm not being all encompassing here. I'm just sort of highlighting a few things. I encourage you to check out their websites for more. Foresight, they have, again, a community as well. They're also doing trainings they have a guide as well. They do trainings in particular with RC's offices. Within innovation, the UN Innovation Network, there's an innovation toolkit, a fellowship program for colleagues in the UN who would like to know more and be more experienced when it comes to innovation. It's the UN Innovation Network is also a convener of specialized groups, such as those people who are interested in creating a culture of innovation or scaling innovation. So UN Innovation Network is kind of a broader one if you want to get engaged there. And then lastly here, digital. It's the new community. It actually hasn't quite launched just yet, but if you follow the links, you can still sign up for it for when it does launch. And then like many new communities, what they're focusing on is building, establishing a common understanding and really helping people nurture from the start. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of what's out there, and you can click on the links to know more about the groups. But yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mary, for also the super rich overview. I think for those who are interested, there you go. You have the different communities around the different tracks, and probably also more synergies to be created between the different communities. But indeed, I think working within a community is always a fantastic opportunity to be in an inclusive space. Again, on the point of inclusion, I think that's great. And also, I think, Mary, if I may just have one final point, and then as a segue into the next intervention on mindsets, it's about the behavioral science piece as a critical enabler for change that you're working on, because that really connects straight away with our next intervention and next presentation on why mindset matters for change and for enabling innovation. And for that, I'm very, very happy and very pleased to actually have Martin with us today. Martin Pulungu-Banda, as mentioned before, from the University of Oxford, from the Side Business School. Martin, now, I know we have had a few exchanges before as we were prepping for the session, and your critical mindsets. I would love that to shine through today as well. So while internal programs at the UN obviously play a crucial, important role in skill development and culture change, how do you think, with a distant view perhaps, how do you think can the UN promote widespread culture change to all its employees? Again, maybe on the point of inclusion, and therefore also cultivate a mindset shift towards embracing new approaches across the entire organizations, maybe also be a bit more risk-taking, because I believe without mindset shift, any intervention we probably take in, won't be very sustainable. So I love to hear from you on that one, Martin. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And to the question of mindset, I would like to begin by saying there are other shifts that support the process of mindset change. And think of this as in the case of a field in a soil. When we look at the field, we tend to see the top part of it. We see the grass, we see the trees, but actually the real work is just beneath the surface, the quality of soil. So what we see upward here is determined by the quality of soil, which is often invisible. And that's where culture lies. And what are we seeking to shift? Like good farmers, we do not just focus on pruning and making sure that there is good spacing between plants and crops. We also want to work at the level of the soil. Good farmers invest 95% of their time improving the soil, the quality of soil. In this particular context, the quality of the soil lies in the mindsets that people in the organization or organizations have. It also lies in the quality of their relationships and the actions they are willing to take. For me, these three components truly matter. Mindset is about how open or closed one's mind is. And you might say, the higher we go in our education system, the more open our minds are. It's not always the case, because sometimes specialization and passion and interest can preclude us from seeing other dimensions that we make conclusions too early. In this culture, are people beginning with listening to anybody, everything? How open are we? How closed are we? And as the UN functions in agencies, do those agencies open to other people that might not claim the same specialism as they are? Quality of relationships will also surface and demonstrate the culture at play. In some form, as an international bureaucracy, the UN can be and is hierarchical. But is the thread, is the spirit which is guiding this hierarchy based on fear or mutual support and trust? do the differences in levels of authority and responsibility end up transmitting fear or an invitation to work together to collaborate? Is it sending in a spirit of competition between agencies, or actually agencies are looking at the same goal, the well-being of society, humanity, wherever it is deployed, and therefore collaboration is part of the lifeblood? Or no, actually between agencies, there is a lot of competition. And in the end, it culminates into action. When you think about policies, when you think about ways of organizing society, sometimes you can end up being trapped in analysis paralysis, meaning all the time focusing on analyzing until you intellectually understand something. The society we are working in doesn't respect a lot of that. Yes, there must be analysis, but let it not lead into paralysis. Just like mindless action also doesn't pay. If you are just acting without being mindful, also doesn't work. How do you have that coming together? It is by learning how to understand enough to tip into experimentation. You may call it prototyping, so that we learn by doing. Analysis paralysis doesn't pay, but also mindless action doesn't pay. We don't have a crystal ball of how next year and 5 years and 20 years is going to be. Our only way of finding through the future is through prototyping. What do? We specialize in sensing and listening to what is going on within the organization and beyond. Then we create time to make sense of what we are observing. And when we get inklings of certain impulses, we move into experimentation, try and error. There are times when our hand is wiser than our head can ever be. So all I am trying to say here is that real culture sits in interest to look at mindset shift, openness or closedness. Number 2, into shifting the quality of our relationships. Fear doesn't pay. Competition, when it goes above a certain level, doesn't pay. But in the end, we will only get to the future we want through try and error. We must be specialists in experimentation, prototyping, if you like. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Martin. And also, to be very honest, for using, this metaphor of the field. And it's interesting, I've just started myself gardening, permaculture, and that's what I've been learning over the past few weeks, that what matters is the quality of the soil if you want to make the garden flourish. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. And maybe if I can also add one more point, it's about what you said about, the ability to embrace risk. Because I think if you want to experiment and try and error, iterate all the things you said, we also need to be in an environment where we can fail, and failure is, perceived to be something positive, not necessarily negative. Working on that. But thank you, Martin. And now segueing, in fact, into the very last enabler, and you, Martin, made that segue already when you actually mentioned relationships and the quality of relationships. And I'm looking at Katja Klinova, from the UN Global Pulse. Katja, so nice that you're with us today. I'm so happy to be with you in this webinar. So my question to you is on partnerships. Let me begin maybe just saying that, as you know, right, or as we all know, the UN is fully embracing, well, I don't know if I would say that it's fully embracing, but the UN is embracing and more embracing, increasingly embracing probably, the UN 2.0 transformations agenda. And while there are some wonderful success stories, of course, of leveraging those UN 2.0 capabilities that we now heard about in this webinar, but also during the week, I think we all realize, nevertheless, that the UN cannot do that alone, right? We cannot develop, we cannot deploy new approaches, methodologies, or technologies without partnering with others, without collaborating with others. Now, in your opinion, in your expertise, and also in your experience, how can we build partnerships that leverage, approaches such as, for example, ecosystem approaches, multi-stakeholder approaches, that then can serve as catalysts for integrating innovative methodologies and technologies into UN programs and operations. So if you can talk a bit about your experience at the Global Pulse and share that with our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, SG, for this question. Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with you all today, and special thanks to Martin for indeed like a really perfect segue into what I was hoping to talk about. And indeed, SG, as you mentioned, the UN might not be the first place you think about when you think about technological breakthroughs. Of course, it is exciting for us to witness and to be a part of the UN 2.0 transformation. We are enhancing skills and capacities at the UN, but let's be clear, we are not a tech company or an AI lab, but we are ideally positioned to help match existing technological advances with important humanitarian and development uses at scale. This is a crucial role, in my view, because if you believe that technological changes we're witnessing today in the world are consequential, then the question of what we as society use these new technologies for becomes critical. Is it going to be all about profit, or can we direct technological innovation towards humanitarian and development needs that the market will not deliver on by itself? What is at stake here are globally shared well-being and prosperity, so it's really important that we get this right. And very naturally, the work of channeling technology into societally impactful uses at scale requires building partnerships. It requires creating collaborative spaces where technologists work alongside humanitarian development professionals, experts on human rights, data protection, responsible AI governance. Together, they can transform AI for good, early research ideas, papers into reliable, safe products that can help our colleagues do their work more efficiently in the field every day. And let me give you a couple of very concrete examples of how we are working on creating exactly such spaces with DISHA, which is a flagship initiative within the Secretary General's Innovation Lab. For DISHA, as much as possible, we're trying not to invent technology from scratch, but leverage relevant research from academia and the private sector. We partner actively with them to productize that research and match it to the needs of our colleagues managing humanitarian operations. DISHA stands for Data Insights for Social and Humanitarian Action. It is a large multi-partner coalition. It includes not only technologists, AI research centers, philanthropists, data partners. Very importantly, it includes humanitarian agencies. And for us, they're not only our users, but co-designers of each DISHA solution. And so currently, we're focusing on two types of solutions to support disaster response operations. The first uses mobile network data to provide insights about population movement post-disaster. We collaborate with numerous UN and external humanitarian organizations like CRS and Red Cross. Together, we co-design, test, refine these solutions while managing associated risks. Quantum Black is our technical partner here. And the second type of DISHA solutions uses high-resolution satellite imagery to assess damage to infrastructure after a natural disaster. Rapid access to this data is crucial for first responders, but today these assessments are usually done manually, can take weeks and may not cover the whole affected area. So we're working with the UN Satellite Center, WFP, and Google to speed up these assessments and expand the areas they cover with technology. So in conclusion, if you are a data provider with information relevant to the SDGs, if you're a technologist, if you are a humanitarian and development agency with unmet data analysis needs, please get in touch with us, because we would love to partner with you to help bridge the gap between AI advances and their practical, safe uses within UN operations. You can find us at disha.unglobalpulse.org. I'm going to put this link in the chat right now. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Katja. Actually, I was just going to ask you to do exactly that, so you did anticipate it. Thank you so much for sharing this. very interestingly sounding initiative. And as you said, for seeking out new partners as well on this. So that's an active call for partnering with you on that. And thank you also for highlighting how you're working through actually partnerships to make sure technology, AI for that matter, is leveraged for good. With that, in fact, we have come to the end of the first part of the discussion. Thank you for the panel for the insights on this 5 questions of enablers. I would like to repeat them before we go into the Q&A. So we talked about human resources. We talked about a fellowship program as a concrete example of how we can build capacities. We talked about communities of practice, touching upon specifically the behavioral science aspect of things. We talked about the criticality of mindset shift through Martin's intervention. We just now also explored how we can do that in partnership, and must do that actually in partnership and collaboration with others. Now, we would like to open the floor for questions. You have the chat box just on the side. Please do type in your ideas, you know, your again, the burning questions you may have, but also maybe information you may want to share, impressions you may want to share with us. We have approximately a bit less than 20 minutes because you have a slight delay in our schedule, but I think there's still enough time to have your voices heard. So looking forward to you sharing with us your ideas. Just bear with us as we are looking into the questions. Okay, so there we go. I'll start with one, more coming. So we'll try to do our best to take as much as we can. And if we don't manage to respond to your question, perhaps please share that with the Innovation Network in the aftermath of this webinar, with, you know, the possibility of getting back to you subsequently. So the first question is, let me read it. Can you provide us with an example of how you have already used the quintet of change to make decisions in HR processes? I guess this is guided to Miguel. Miguel, putting you back on the spot. Thank you.
No problem, and thank you so much for it. It's been excellent questions. I've tried to answer some of them as other colleagues were speaking, but this is an excellent question, and also there are some other related questions, particularly on behavioral science. So let me try and provide, you know, a couple of examples on what we're already doing in the context of human resources to really integrate and espouse, you know, the approaches in terms of the quintet of change in our vision, in our objectives, in our processes, in the way in which we're organizing talent management and everything we do under human resources. So, for example, if you choose data, one thing we've done in terms of supporting, you know, embracing different skills and capabilities in the organization is to look at all the rainbow of jobs within data analytics. So we've worked with the business owners and subject matter experts, and we've created a multitude of job descriptions that will facilitate the organization in terms of communicating what is looking in terms of those skills and capabilities in the context of either opening opportunities for staff to upskill, reskill, but also to bring those new talents into the organization. So that's one thing that we've done in terms of facilitating data in bringing those talents to the organization. In terms of how we use it internally, we're doing a lot of investments in terms of workforce portals, both for member states and internally for decision makers, to really be able to harvest the potential of human resources data and to help nuance calibrate our decision making. So in terms of communicating, but also looking at problems, challenges, opportunities, in the areas of, are we really being truly universal? Are our selection methods, for example, truly as universal as we want them to be? We'll look at data on how candidates experience the organization. We'll look at a number of qualitative measures, for example, in terms of how different demographics or groups experience or see their opportunities to navigate the organization, how they are weaved in and can contribute in different facets of the work, and so on and so forth. In terms of the digital aspects of the quantitative change, I would say that we're doing a number of investments, particularly in the learning arena, to deploy a new improved learning management system together with the staff college. So that's one critical aspect. But I will also enhance. We're doing some small steps in terms of embracing artificial intelligence to advance, or assisted technology in terms of, for example, reaching markets where we have gaps in terms of representation in the workforce, be in terms of gender, in terms of geography. So we do use those tools to reach markets and talent pools. We also use technology to help us, or to help hiring managers screen in a more effective way, and looking at the skills and capabilities. But also we use it in other internal processes. And to link back to what I said earlier, in terms of really being able to have the scale to redo, review, and calibrate our multitude of jobs across the organization, we're going to have to use artificial intelligence as a tool, technology, to assist us do that, given the volume of different types of jobs that we have. So that would be under digital. In the context of strategic foresight, for example, of course, in human resources, strategic workforce planning is critical. And to identify the skills and capabilities that we're going to be attaching strategic importance to into the future. But also, I would say that we also use those reflections to try and understand potential biases and heuristics that can influence decision making and perspectives of managers and leaders in the UN. So by recognizing some of those, we can have mitigating measures to reduce biases. We know, for example, we have our within the anti-racism office, there's lots of efforts to look at mitigating risks in terms of biases, in terms of race. So that's a critical example of how we're using and looking at strategic foresight to try and mitigate those risks. In terms of inclusive leadership, of which what I said also falls into, but ensuring that managers and leaders are trained to recognize unconscious bias, to create a psychosocial or psychologically safe environments, so that their teams can really foster, grow, and be the best they can be, and we can leverage their several talents. So these are some examples in which we're looking at human behavior heuristics and looking at in the sphere of HR, as I said, in terms of creating a conducive working environment, in terms of really ensuring that our staff selection processes are really truly as universal as they can be. So there's some examples in which we're embracing that. So let me stop there. So as I said, it's about, in some areas, we've taken greater steps. In others, it's just smaller steps. But you can rest assured that we remain, steadfast committed to look for all opportunities possible to embrace, opportunities to magnify the quantitative change into the organization. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Miguel. And it's also fascinating how you're actually seemingly applying all the different tools within that toolbox within, HR. So it's a very good example of sort of whole systems approach. We would like to move on to the next question, and also not having too much more time left. We have 10 minutes left, but let me see what I can take on. So one actually very interesting question that came in is about how we measure success, right? How we measure impact, something that I also obviously as a social innovation space I'm asked this many times, not an easy one to respond, but particularly or specifically, the question is about what metrics or indicators are used by the UN to measure the success and the impact of its efforts in promoting sustainable transformation. So we spoke about, interventions that might be ad hoc, but also what can we do to make those interventions more sustainable. This is more of an open question. So if any of the panel members might want to speak to that, but maybe to be a bit more sort of, activity and program oriented. Zsuzsa, can I put you a bit on the spot on this one, because you are working on a specific program. So how do you go about measuring success and impact in this very specific scope of your program?
This is such a good question, and it's something that we keep revisiting. So we've gone, I think, through a whole array of approaches where we've used surveys asking the participants, was the topics that we presented relevant, or the tasks something that took you ahead in your innovation journey. We've gone through iterations where we ask participants to submit short, quick answers during the fellowship on what they're working on, how are they applying the tools, is it working out for them? We also look at indicators on how many of our fellows go on to apply for innovation funds. And that's also always a great indicator, although it's not necessarily something we can always keep track of, because for the innovation funds, it's usually teams that apply. So we can't always see whether a fellow is in an innovation team for a fund. We also see a lot of fellows speaking to their colleagues, and more colleagues from the certain operations or headquarters joining the fellowship in the next iteration. So we actually end up with some hubs of innovation where multiple people have gone through the different years of the fellowship, and you can really see the creativity and the energy and the commitment to using innovation as a way of working rather than an add-on in these places. You can also see the managers get on board in locations where multiple people have taken part in the fellowship. We are also working on bringing managers into the fellowship and other learning programs to create more enabling environments. And measuring the impacts of these is really, really hard. So actually this year we are taking another big look, as we do every year, but this year with the targeted focus on M&E. And we will be looking at what has worked for us so far, what are the limitations of the measurements that we do. We definitely always go beyond numbers. So while numbers are a great indication of the interest people have in the fellowship, how many people have applied each year, how many people finish the program and do all the tasks, how many people go on to apply for the innovation funds. These are great numbers, but we also always make sure to go beyond this and to measure those things that are maybe a little bit more complex to measure, and to see the actual impact the fellowship has on individuals, on their careers, on their contexts, on the lives of the people we serve. So we're looking at how to best do this going forward.
Thank you so much, Zsuzsa. I think it's critical, as you say, that there is an impact story that we can tell, and that we do also check in on that impact story actually on a regular basis, because impact can also shift over time.
And if I can add to that,
yes,
sorry, very quickly, you triggered an important thing I didn't share. We actually have a blog, the Innovation Service has one, and it has a learning section as well. So one of the ways that we also highlight impact is that we share the stories of our fellows. And you'll notice that not all of the stories are about big successful projects, but most of them are about the process, because that's where we put our focus with the fellowship. And that's also a big part of measuring success, is we're not measuring by how many projects are realized or realized successfully. We're measuring the impact of the process and the learning. So if you go to our blog, which we'll put into the chat in a moment, you will see that there's a lot about the journey that fellows go through, and the importance of taking all the steps, and of being inclusive and collaborating and working with partners. I could go on. I'll leave it at that. We'll put the blog into the chat.
Thank you so much. I think Johanna already, was ahead of the game and shared the resource. So please make sure that you do check out this, rich catalog of different information that's being shared with you. We have space and time now for probably one last question, which I'm going to direct, looking at its nature, to Martin, if that's okay. But please, again, panel, jump in, feel free to jump in after. Martin, you made this point about, the mindset and how to be open and creative. And one of the questions that came in, which I can also just echo from my side, is how do we actually, in a bureaucratic organization or systemic organization as we are, part of the UN, how can we shift really from a fear-driven culture or mindset, so to speak, to one that values innovation, to one that actually promotes the opportunity to experiment? that was also another question that I just packed into the very same one. So if you can have briefly, you know, a reflection on this, that would be super.
Obviously, it works faster if the top leadership becomes aware that they could be the bottleneck, while they, in the short run, benefit from fear. The system they superintend over time does not. And eventually, talent begins to go away because they don't want to be stifled. They have brilliant ideas and they want to be given space for experimentation. It is far much easier when the leadership becomes aware and, as it were, begin to intentionally undress themselves of power so that they equalize everybody else in the system and create a sense of safety, that try and error does not end up in punishment or stifled career. But I'm pretty sure my colleagues would like to add on to that.
Sorry.
Yeah, I would be happy to add. Like, thank you, Martin. Completely agree. I think also that there is maybe, when we talk about innovation and fear, there's sometimes fear of challenging the rules and asking, like, should they still apply or should they evolve? Because it's associated with, maybe it's a desire to break the rules, and it's not. There are two different things. Examining whether rules, you know, in a storied organization that predate many of us still apply, or has the world changed and they need to evolve with it. So I think having the boldness to question it sometimes would serve us well.
Thank you so much, Katja. Before we wrap up, maybe Mary, if we can also put you quickly on the spot on that one through the work that you do on behavioral science, because that's obviously directly related to how we, you know, go about exploring emotions and what those emotions that also may evoke in terms of then behavior for change.
Yeah, I think there's a lot we could say about creating an enabling environment to do this, kind of with understanding of behavioral science. A lot of what we say comes down to understanding how context shapes our decisions and ultimately our follow-on actions and behaviors. And it's exactly what colleagues have been speaking to. How do we create that enabling environment to do this meaningfully? So yeah, just to echo colleagues, without going into too much, behavioral science is the way you can also perhaps layer on to the existing work that is being done to create these nice, comfortable spaces to explore UN 2.0.
All right, thank you so much, Mary. I think with that being said, I guess it's a wrap, at least from the panel and the interactive discussion that we have had with you participants. Thank you so much from wherever you are, like whichever discipline, whichever part of the UN. It's been really a pleasure to be connected. Before we say goodbye, I just wanted to maybe highlight 2 points with you. This is obviously a call to join other UN 2.0 week sessions. So there's a wealth of such sessions where you can have more information, more insights, more, you know, inspiration, I would say. I hope you got some inspiration out of this one. At least I did as a moderator, learned a lot from my own work in Geneva on social innovation, including on the session of training, which is going to happen later this afternoon. And also just one last point to say, please, if you want to, join the UN 2.0 mailing list so you can be kept informed and on top of things when it comes to what's happening in the space, because as you just saw, and as you know, probably there's a lot that is happening in the space. I would like to thank you again to the panel, to the UN Innovation Network for organizing this super interesting webinar, and for those who participated and engaged with us in this conversation. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.